What's your favorite creepy campfire story? Gosh, let's see if I can recall it correctly. There was a body of a fairly large person, once found in the woods. They were quickly killed, and there was nothing extremely off about the scene, except he had half of his pointer, ring, and pinky finger all missing from his left hand. No one could find the missing fingers, and they never found any clues. A few weeks later, another body was found, another man who was a bit smaller than the previous guy. Same situation, quickly killed, and 3 fingers missing all from the left hand, and still no clues. A few more weeks went by, and this time it was a woman who was found, smaller than the second guy found, same fingers missing from the same hand. This went on for a while, with the victims getting smaller and smaller, until it was kids' bodies being found. One teenager's body, though, only had the ring finger and pinky finger removed. The police found a fingerprint at this crime scene, and they found it matched the prints from a theft record from the previous victim. The guy telling the story then told the kids that the killer was searching to replace his fingers, and so far, he had yet to see if the fingers of children their age would fit. He then took off his glove, showing he had a scarred pointer finger and was missing half his ring and pinky finger, and then lunged at the kids while screaming. He later told the kids he lost the 2 in a work accident, and doctors were able to save his very mangled pointer finger. He told this story every year at camp. This is amazingly well done. Both your storytelling, and the digitally impaired man's commitment. Thank you. As awful as it may sound, I can't wait to tell this story to kids around a campfire, minus the pulling off the glove because I, fortunately, am not missing any fingers. You could easily change that last bit though. For that slight added realism. Yeah, look at this lazy mother effer refusing to commit to the part. Holy crap, that's genius of the guy. He was well known to his friends as the guy to joke around about it. His favorite joke would be about how he can't wave to people with that hand, cause they always think he's flipping them off. He always would prank and freak out new employees, while then also preaching about work safety and to be careful so they didn't also have something similar happen to them. And that's why you always leave a note. I worked as a camp counselor for a few summers and had a great signature ghost story. I don't really remember too many of the details, but the gist was there was some ghost who would kill you unless you gave him 2 of your teeth and told him 2 other names of people to kill. It was a fine story, but the real kicker came at the end of the night. When all my baby teeth had been replaced with adult teeth, 2 of them never came in and were missing. For a few years I had a retainer with 2 fake teeth to fill the gaps. Before sending the kids off to bed I would pop the retainer out in secret and give them a big old toothy smile. Scared the absolute bejesus out of the little buggers every time. That's amazing. The best campfire stories are the unique ones that can only be told because of a special prop like that. There was a Brit who was driving through Ireland as the weather got progressively worse and day soon turned to night. He suddenly realized that he was on the wrong road, but there was nowhere to turn around, so he pressed on, barely able to see the road through the rain. Without warning, his car just died. No battery, no engine. He assumed water must have shorted something and he'd best start walking. He was soaking wet in 100 yards, but he continued walking. An hour later, he heard a noise behind him and turned to see a car coming very slowly up the road behind him, its lights very dim. As it reaches him, he reaches out through the torrential rain and opens the back door and jumps in. Shocked, he is the only person in the car. There is no one driving and no other passengers. He freezes with fear as the car slowly continues up the road through the pouring rain. Before long a village comes into view and the car creeps silently and slowly into the village. The Brit spies a pub, so he jumps out and runs inside, not looking back. Panting with horror, he orders a beer and sits down. A minute later 2 soaking wet Irishmen come into the pub. The taller one points at the Brit and says, "That's him, Paddy. That's the bastard I saw jump out of the car we were pushing." Ha ha ha, love it. You got me. My family had one called the man in the corn, or beans in the corn. There was once a hobo who was stealing ears of corn from a local man's garden. Now food was hard to come by, and someone stealing that which you're growing was especially frustrating. The man saw the hobo in the garden and fired a shotgun shot over the hobo's head. The next day, the hobo was back there again stealing ears of corn. The man decided he would teach the hobo a lesson, so he poured all the lead shot out of his shotgun shells and filled them with small dry beans. The very next day the hobo was back in the cornfield again, and the man fired twice on the hobo, and the hobo screamed and ran down the corn rows fast, pleading the whole way. The man watched for days, but the hobo was never seen again. Some days later, the man still had bean shells in his shotgun, so he aimed at a plank of wood standing over by his well. The plank ripped to pieces. When the next planting seasons came, the farmer walked his cornfield to its far corners, to cut corn husks and prepare to plow. Along the way, he found tiny bean plants coming up through the soil, one here, another there, all lining up to lead him to a big bunch of beans coming up along the edge of the field. When he went to examine the bunch of beans, he first saw shoes soles turned to one side, and then the outline of a body, sank in the mud and soil. He realized he had killed the hobo, and the random beans that had fallen out of his body had sprouted along the way. My father had bought that particular farm during the war years, and he said for 20 years, random bean plants would show up in that field. Any bean plant that showed up in our garden was given the chance to grow, and one year there was a bean planted that wrapped around a corn stalk. My father did not harvest the corn ears on that plant. If I remember right, that was an old farming technique. Corn, beans, and a particular squash. Each plant put into the soil what another took away, and growing up the strong corn stalks gave the beans support. The Three Sisters. Yeah, this isn't a horror story, bro, it's a farming technique. I don't know, man. I don't think human body parts are a valid farming technique. Keep it down low. If you want to grow, start with a hoe. Bow. Yep, squash kept the weeds down, beans generated nitrogen for the corn, as I recall. My dad preferred separate ridge rows for his beans and separate bean poles for them to climb. Hand-picked sweet corn had squash sometimes. He provided raw source vegetables to local stores and chain-based IGA stores for years and years. He kept that money coming in by the sweat of his brow, and as a family, we ate healthy and well. Had me in the first half. I thought you were saying killing hobos and having their bodies sprout beans was an old technique. Ha ha. That's spooky. Whoa. The golden arm, or at least the version my mom tells. A fellow was looking to be married to one of the rich merchant's daughters to gain the fortune that would come with her. Fortunately, the merchant had an unmarried daughter still, so the fellow begins to court her. The first thing he noticed is that she had a solid gold right arm. She apparently lost it in a childhood accident, and her father had a golden arm forged for her. Seeing this as a sign of extreme wealth, he continued with courting her, making her believe he truly loved her and not for her father's money. In turn, she fell deeply in love with him. They get married, and the fellow is given his riches along with part of the merchant business his now father-in-law owned, thus giving him more money. However, he soon realized his wife was now of no real use, so he ignored her, gave her gifts and had dinner with her, but the love he said he felt had disappeared. Angry and heartbroken, the daughter accused him of marrying her for her money, in which he boldly states of course. She was furious, screaming about going to tell her father what a scoundrel he truly was, and their riches would be stripped away along with his job. This angered the fellow. After all, he worked so hard to get to here, and he wasn't going to let her take it away. So he pushed her down the cellar stairs and let her snap her neck on the stone. He pleaded heartbroken to the grief-stricken father, losing his most favorite daughter, the fellow's riches intact. The fellow and family hold a funeral for the daughter and weep and cry. When it was but him and his dead wife, he opened the casket and pulled out a saw, for she did not need her golden arm in the grave. That night he slept with the arm under his pillow, not wanting even the servants to see it before he melts it down into bars. He slept soundly until a voice like the wind asks, "Where's my golden arm?" Slow and far away the voice echoed through the sleeping house, so quiet he thought it was just a draft. Until the voice came again, closer and louder this time, as if down the hall. "Where's my golden arm?" Sitting up, the fellow looked around fearfully, too scared to do anything, as he hears again much closer. "Where's my golden arm?" He felt the heat on his back and a movement from under his pillow, but he was too scared to look away from the door as he hears again, just outside the frame, the wail of, "Where's my golden arm?" It felt like hellfire on his back as he felt the hot metal of the hand on his back, seemingly crawling on its own as he watches the door knob turn. The maid found his body that morning, face frozen in horror and hair a bright white, hands still clutching the sheets around his body. But the strangest thing was that his dead wife's golden arm was on his chest, hand wrapped tightly around his throat. Sorry this is long, but this is the first time I've written this story out. It's always been verbally told. Return the slab, or suffer my curse. Excellent retelling, brings back memories. What country does this story come from? It's interesting, but begs the question, why would a rich person buy such an ineffective prosthetic arm for his beloved daughter? No clue. My mom's dad is the one who told her. That's as far as this version of the story goes back, I'm afraid. So a story I always tell around a campfire that I think is quite spooky is the legend of El Silban, the whistling ghost. It's a Venezuelan folk tale, but I have a tradition of telling it. Anyway, the legend goes that on cold dark nights in remote places, especially in South America, a whistle can be heard coming down the road. At first it will seem loud, like it's right next to you, but as time passes it begins to fade and get more and more quiet until it's almost gone. The trick is, as El Silban's whistle gets louder, he's further away, and when he's right next to you the whistle is very faint and sounds like it's far away. Once El Silban is at your doorstep, he will sit down and begin to count the skulls of his victims, and you have to listen to him count every single skull, or one of your family members will die soon after and become one of his skulls. El Silban is said to dress like a farmer with a large straw hat, torn clothes, ghostly aura, and a pale dead face. It's not that scary, but it's interesting. Dude was in another thread a few weeks ago that had video of El Silban that had been following for years. Let me try to find it. Spooky as crap. Edit, here it is. Honestly spooky as hell. Web link. Not the best thing to read and watch before bed, crying face. Don't you mean a few years ago? Oh, you believe in time, huh? Holy crap, that was 5 years ago? Where does the time go? Also, he will avoid dogs, so just adopt a pack of dogs. Lol. It's pretty simple and I will not drag it out. So here it goes. One day my neighbor walked over into my backyard while I was in my garden. He looked disheveled and was wearing pajamas. When I stood up I noticed his eyes were sunken in and it looked as if he lost a lot of weight. I tried to crack a joke about how this would be a great day to go down to the beach if it were not for the weather being so cold. But the joke fell flat. A week later I bumped into his wife at the post office. She was in line in front of me mailing about a dozen packages. I asked if her husband was feeling better because he looked a bit under the weather last week when he was in my backyard. She tells me I must have been mistaken. He passed away over a month ago from cancer. The packages she was mailing were his action figure toy collection she sold online. I was speechless. Was I crazy? Maybe I did misjudge the weekend I thought I saw him. Then I really thought hard. I did not remember him saying anything to me. I did remember telling him the joke and it falling flat. I assumed I wasn't funny and that's why he didn't laugh. Or maybe he couldn't because it may have been just his spirit. When I returned home from the post office I immediately start telling my wife about our neighbor. Before I could get out he had passed away from cancer. She says, "Oh yeah, I saw you guys talking last weekend." And then I tell her about seeing his wife at the post office and being told about his passing. So we go to our security camera and play back the video from the week before. It's clear in the video that I do stand up. It's obvious I'm acknowledging the presence of someone and have a brief conversation. And then I go back to tending to my garden. But on the video the entire time I was the only person in my backyard. That's a good spooky story. Nonfiction is always the best. The lore of my cottage that my great-great-uncle watches over it. Mostly because I saw an apparition of a man at 2 to 3 in the morning when I was a young kid. When I went to use the bathroom, rocking chairs would move by themselves. I once heard an unknown man speaking in my room at my cottage, but the only males at the time were my brother and I and my cousin. Except my brother and I were young kids. My cousin had just started puberty, and this sounded like an older man who smoked a lot. And a few years ago when another cousin was staying there, she saw an apparition of a man sitting at her computer chair in her room, the same room I stayed in as a kid. It's both creepy but assuring having someone watching over us. She saw an apparition of a man sitting at her computer chair. When did great-great-uncle learn to use the internet? My grandpa still calls it magic box. He was just spinning around in the chair for funsies. Any idea of who he might have been? I'm going to go out on a limb here and say it was their great-great-uncle. Ops great-uncle presumably. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe to be the first to know about Red Rabbit Reader's new videos. If you like our videos, please like them on YouTube and share them with your friends. We welcome your comments below. Press to start another of our videos.